is just a huge honor for me today to be podcast interviewing Dr. Thomas Wright Nabors III, DDS, AAACD, FAGD, has been creating some of the most beautiful smiles in Nashville, Tennessee for over 20 years. He is one of less than 420 accredited cosmetic dentists in the world. He has been a teacher and lecturer for cosmetic and total health dentistry all over the United States and was a co-founder of the first laboratory in the U.S. dedicated to Salivary Diagnostics OralDNA Labs. He is a leader in emerging field of tele-dentistry, creating a simplified approach to getting low-stress, common-sense dental health care advice virtually. And before I start talking, whenever I see you're the third, and I'm sad because I'm the second. I could have been the third, but my grandfather was Howard Taft Ferran, and he, by the time he named my dad, he changed his view. He didn't like that president anymore. So he changed my dad's name to Howard Eugene Ferran. So I'm Howard Eugene Ferran the second. And it was so confusing that my dad started going by his short and middle name. He started going, but everyone started calling him Gene, and they just called me a mistake. And so that's how that worked. But hey, my first question, are you okay? How are you doing in Nashville, man? I'm so sorry to hear you guys had a...
Well, we're doing good. I think that was a very unusual way to spend Christmas morning. It was interesting because, you start your day pretty normally. And of course, everything is a little bit abnormally quiet, with sort of the way we're celebrating things right now. And so it took a little bit longer for the news of what happened to actually get out because so many of us were just kind of at home and leisurely enjoying the morning. But my office is actually 2 blocks from the blast site. And I'm 2 blocks uphill, and my building lost a couple of windows and broke a water line. And so I think the size of that explosion was a lot bigger than people might realize just by seeing it on TV. But yeah, man, it's a weird world. But
your dental office was affected by that explosion?
Yeah.
Now, was it on? I'm sorry, I'm going to give away my alcoholism, but in Nashville, I mean, I know 2nd Avenue. That's where all the bars are, and you can see the Titan Stadium at the end.
Right.
Was it on that street?
It was on that street, the street that parallels the river, which parallels the Titan Stadium. So it was right in the middle of our entertainment district. So it's such an unusual place, and the way it happened was so unusual with the timing of it. So no one would be around, and the fact that no one was killed there was quite something.
And then it was just 10 years ago, you had the crazy flood.
Yeah. Right in the same area. Yeah.
Are you thinking about rebuilding your dental office in an ark?
Well, I'm on the 9th floor of a high rise, so I feel pretty secure up high. But it's hard to explain. I mean, everybody says, well, 2020, and it's definitely been, of course, right before COVID hit in March, we had a pretty big tornado hit our town also. And, like every town around, we've all been affected in certain ways, whether it's been more extreme lockdowns or whether it's tornadoes, hurricanes, flooding, bombs. I think I'm like everybody else that I'm ready for 2021 and hopefully we'll have a better year than we did so far.
I gotta hand it to Nashville though. A couple things about Nashville. I have sent my mom and her friends to London, Paris, Rome, Jerusalem, all these things. The only place that she's asked to go back, and it's been like 3 or 4 times, Opryland, USA.
Yeah.
Can I help you? She loves that indoor aquarium.
That's crazy, man.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you something else about Nashville. The United States only has really 3 or 4 musical cities, but it's, my gosh, it's Bourbon Street. It's Beale Street in Memphis, Tennessee for jazz.
Yeah.
And Second Avenue. Is it 2nd Avenue or 2nd Street? 2nd Avenue.
It's 2nd Avenue.
In Nashville. And by the way, a lot of time, I can't tell you over the last 30 years how many times I was lecturing there, and I have some friends are like, no, I'm not really into country music. I said, dude, when you're on 2nd Avenue, everyone's into country. And you go down there, and I can't tell you how many people that don't like country music said that they just fell in love with it. I mean, it's just different when you're on Beale Street, 2nd Avenue, or that. It's just, God.
It's fun, man. I've been downtown Nashville for about 23 years now or so, and it's amazing how our town has grown and it's kind of gone from a country town to more of an entertainment town. And so while the country's popular, there's so many different, I would equate it a little bit more to like Austin, Texas, maybe, where there's a lot more variety of music and entertainment than there was even 10 years ago. So I'm kind of right in the middle of it here. And so we kind of miss it right now. It's really quiet for the most part.
Okay, well, my first question for you has got to be to all the hygienists who are watching this show thinking, what? No more hygiene? Who is this idiot? I'm gonna track him down and choke him. So what do you say to the hygienists who are seeing this podcast? No more hygiene. Or does that mean that they've been fired and they no longer have a job?
Well, we'll have to thank Steve Anderson for that. Maybe that's an attention getter because he came up with the name. But the principle is that we're in the middle of a therapeutic revolution in terms of my opinion about where we ought to be in hygiene. We learned a lot this year about the CDC, a lot about testing and COVID testing, and we're even learning about DNA PCR testing through COVID testing. And what you're finding is that periodontal disease is a disease. It's an infection and a disease, so it has kind of a double name. But the CDC will tell you that 50% of the American population over age 30 already has periodontal disease, and that's not gingivitis.
What percent?
50.
50, okay.
So all of us have patients over 30, and if half of them have some sort of disease, for us to continue to be coding on a regular basis for healthy prophies predominantly, if you're not coding for some type of periodontal service about half the time, then you're basically missing a lot of disease that's going through your practice. And everybody wants to say, well, it's not in my practice, or I'm in an affluent area and it doesn't affect us. And, periodontal disease is an equal opportunity infector. And so, our position is that we need to move hygiene into therapy. And I think that a therapist, in my opinion, is much more appropriate than cleaning. And in terms of, my view on kind of how this works is I've seen what nurse practitioners have done in medicine. And I really feel like the hygiene role has a huge opportunity in our practices to become a lot more important and maybe transition more into a therapist or a practitioner role, kind of like medicine has. And so anyway, the value that I place on our hygiene team is significant.
And it's amazing how it's shocking news to people that maybe the mouth and the rest of the body are connected. I remember one time I was flying on Eastern Airlines. They had a medical emergency, and they, when I started lecturing in 87, airplanes were all empty, and that was when flights were $1,000 to go anywhere, and there was no one on the plane. And I went up there, and they go, "Are you a doctor?" I go, "Yeah, I'm a dentist in Phoenix." They go, "Oh, I'm sorry, we need a doctor." And then the person that ended up was okay was the registered nurse.
Yeah,
the nurse. And I'm like, oh, okay, I'm not a doctor. I guess the mouth is not connected to the rest of the human body. But a lot of these people are saying, okay, well, do I cause the sun to come up? Because every morning I wake up, I drink coffee, and the sun comes up. Is it a correlation or a cause effect on the oral health, the systemic link? There's still a lot of naysayers that say, I think it's a correlation, not cause effect. What do you say to those guys?
Well, I would think scientifically, you have to look at research and data. And if you just took a microorganism, let's say like Porphyromonas gingivalis, and really analyze what that is as a microbe, and you realize that microbe can invade tissue, it can invade white blood cells, it can cross the blood-brain barrier. And so it can do a lot of things. If we took it out of context with periodontal disease and just equated it to what it is as a microbe, it's a significant pathogen. And so the causality of that, if they're talking about now, well, what's the relationship between Alzheimer's disease and periodontal disease? Is it plaque and calculus, or is it Porphyromonas gingivalis? And when you start looking at the disease causal agents, then you'll start to understand the scientific research that says, okay, well, we know that having periodontal disease, if it's got Porphyromonas gingivalis, if it's got Tannerilla forsythia, if it's got the red complex, orange complex, then we know those microbes are going to be connected to other forms of systemic disease. And so our job in the dental profession would be then to alleviate the risk by at least alleviating the source. And so, to me, I would say, yeah, there's a correlation, but there's also a causality. And there's plenty of data that would back that up.
Do you think it's gaining momentum, or do you think it's flattening out, or did the pandemic change the course of total wellness dental practice? Is it gone to more emergency room dentistry, or what is your expectations for 2021 about how normal could we get again?
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you, from what we teach and what I see in my practice, it says our patient populations really, they understand the correlation between the mouth and the body. I mean, they're getting that information that they understand healthy mouth, healthy body, that gum tissue is skin. It's not some weird mouth tissue, and that mouths ought to be able to have the ability to get sick, different than our throats, our lungs, our stomachs, our intestines. We're very familiar, and patients are familiar with those areas getting sick. And for us to continue to think that the mouth is just something that we clean, every 6 months, and that's all it's ever going to take to remain healthy, is just a dated view of the oral systemic connection. And so, what I see in 2021 is we've never talked this much about testing in the history of anything that I can remember. And salivary diagnostics, when we started OralDNA, was very new. You just have to send a plaque sample to USC or one of the actual auger plate labs to try to grow it and get it back. But now with DNA PCR, it's changed the game, in terms of knowing what your target organisms are. And I see the COVID, the testing, it's just opened the door for us to have conversations about testing and about health and about the different factors that make us sick as human beings and how they work together. That's kind of a long answer, but I don't mean to just kind of trail on about it. So maybe I'll stop there.
No, what I like about it is if I know my homies, and there's a couple of Americas. I grew up in Kansas, right in the middle. I mean, you got the New Yorkers, and you got the Californian Silicon Valleys, and everything in between is a flyover state, and it doesn't matter. And if you were saying all this, and you were in Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous downtown Manhattan next to Larry Rosenthal, or you were in Key Biscayne or Beverly Hills, all my homies like whatever. But dude, you're in Nashville. You're in Middle America. I mean, Nashville. I mean, it's just, if you can do it in Nashville, you can do it in Kansas City and Dallas and Phoenix. And it's a replicable thing for 300 million people. But you can do things in Beverly Hills that you just can't do in Parsons, Kansas,
Right.
Think of you as a real world dentist in Nashville. And so if real world people in Nashville, or if it's working, it's a thing.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, is I think our patients are a lot more in tune to this than we think that they are. I really, as we teach this process, and we've been teaching this, for 6 or 8 years now, it's more trying to untrain what we were taught in the dental profession, that the cause of periodontal disease was debris. There was plaque and calculus. We knew there was bacteria associated with it, but our target was debris, right? And now, knowing so much more about the science, when you're targeting the microorganism, that's a completely different approach. But it's a lot more understandable for the patient to understand testing and other illnesses. And so I think the way we talk about it is probably the biggest factor. And you interrupt me when you want to, but I would say it's kind of like this. When we say you've got some bone loss, right? We use the term bone loss, and that's why don't we say skull loss, right? Or head rot? It's like if you've got an infection that's destroying the bone of your skull, be it the maxilla or the mandible or both, if that same infection was on your arm and it was destroying the bone of your arm, we'd be in the hospital, right? It would be in the emergency room. And of course, on our arm, we're not an inch away from the carotid arteries and 2 inches away from the floor of the brain. And yet, we continue to want to say a little bleeding or a little bone loss, or a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And we tend to minimize that because we're still focusing on it, on old science. And I realize that debris is important, but I'm telling you, man, it's like, you and I mentioned a minute ago that I like to work on cars. I like to restore cars, raise cars, and I can get dirt and grime all over my hands, all under my fingernails, but my fingers don't get sick because they're dirty. If I cut my hand while I'm doing that, and the bacteria that are on me get in me, that's when we have inflammation. And I think that's the new target word is inflammation.
Now, we talked about earlier, you're the third and your dad is the first, and you go by Tom. Who's Tom and who's Tommy?
I'm Tommy. Yeah.
Oh, you're Tommy. Okay. So,
Yeah.
Did your dad see any of this coming when you were in grammar school, or?
Oh man,
is
yeah,
this
that's a joke Steve and I have. I knew how to use a phase contrast microscope from about that time I was 10 and up, because when I would work for my dad in the summers or after school, I was always the one that would take the sample and put it under a microscope, and then the patient would look at that on a television, and we would record it on a VCR tape. And then we would record the plaque sample after therapy, so we would have a comparison from before and after. So we use the microbes as a target, even though it's a phase contrast microscope visually. And that goes back to the 80s, Nashville Institute of Health, and when the phase contrast really came on the scene as a diagnostic tool to help start to figure these infections out. And of course, we had one. I grew up with one. I thought that was normal. And DNA PCR has dated the phase contrast now, but it's a great motivational tool for sure.
And my God, I want you to talk through. First of all, your faculty is world class. I mean, you got Bradley Bale and Amy Doneen been on the show. You got Tony Locopino, Susan Maple, Steve Maisley, Stephanie Lauding, a hygienist, David Seaman, a chiropractor with an MS degree, DeWitt Wilkerson, DMD, Guy Yatros. I mean, you're not hurting for talent on this show, but I want you to go back to that childhood thing, because when you were little, tell them about the story of the journey with oral DNA.
Yeah, well, so, we'll use the term salivary diagnostics a lot, because that's really what this evolved into. What it originated was trying to figure out the microbiology of periodontal disease on a practical chairside basis, so that we can actually talk to patients and have a new target endpoint, which was not just physical signs and symptoms, but the microbiology associated with the disease and how to measure that. And Hein Life Science out of Nieren, Germany, was doing salivary diagnostics in Europe to the tune of about 60,000 tests a year. So the Europeans were ahead of us, and basically using saliva as a medium to detect bacteria through a process called DNA PCR. So it's called polymerase chain reaction, and it's different than the agar plate testing like we're familiar with, like the strep test, grow donor plate, is it strep or not? And those are for aerobic microbes. So anaerobes are different, which is our periodontal disease friends. They're anaerobes, so we have never been able to culture that practically in dentistry. So Hein Life Science was beginning the salivary diagnostic phase of testing anaerobic microbes in an effort to show us, okay, here's your clinical signs and symptoms, here are your target microbes, and if you need an antibiotic, here's specifically what you can use as a target regimen if it's even needed. So my dad actually got in touch with Tobias Hein this was back when we were in Mississippi, and invited Tobias to come from Nieren, Germany to Columbus, Mississippi, and he did. And so that is where we really saw the genesis of DNA PCR on a chairside basis. We started a company with Tobias called Advanced Dental Diagnostics. That was me and my dad, my brother, and ran that out of the extra room of my dad's house, and grew that to a point where ultimately, as many businesses do, venture capitalists saw what we were doing. They wanted to build a lab, but by this time we had moved to Nashville, and we ended up building a lab in Nashville, Tennessee, and that was the beginning of what became OralDNA Labs. And then OralDNA Labs ultimately was sold to Quest Diagnostics, which most people know is the largest laboratory in the world, because their emphasis on finding a medium besides blood that would carry data and be easily accessible, especially in third world countries, was saliva. I mean, people really don't know how much information is in saliva, and not just from a periodontal standpoint. And so that's kind of the really rapid version of how all this, kind of took place over the last decade. But now, what I learned in my experience with OralDNA was I was one of the lead testers. I probably tested more patients than anybody in the country, especially when we were developing the test model. And what I've found is that at that time, was that we had one of the most amazing tools for treating a disease that was very unpredictable. But we had a very low interest in people caring about it because no one at the time really cared about treating periodontal disease. And statistically, we would look at our codes. And I mean, if a practice has 20% coding or 30% coding of periodontal codes, that was considered good. And, so it was a really tough road to bring that product to market. And then ultimately, the oral systemic link became much more talked about. And then that has become the topic, sort of 2018. Oral systemic link really became popular. And then ultimately that kind of has evolved into total body health and inflammation. And if you'll look now, even on perio.org, which is the Association of Periodontists, everything is associated with periodontal disease and inflammation. How do we stop inflammation? And that's a really long, I'm probably bored everyone to death with that take. But that's how Salivary Diagnostics came to be, at least in terms of OralDNA.
Well, that is a great story. And again, you have so many legends on there, like on your Total Wellness Dental deal. I mean, like Anthony Iacopina. I mean, he was a associate dean of Marquette. Then he became the dean of Gerald Nisnick's dental school. I think that's their name in Manitoba after him now. I mean, there's just so many amazing people that are coming on board with Salivary Diagnostics, periodontal disease. My favorite analogy is that when people have their gums, I said, well, when your gums are bleeding like that your gums, if I flatten them out, it covers your whole hand. I mean, imagine if you fell off your bicycle and you hit the asphalt hands first, and both your hands are raw. And we had the first time I did the Mesa bike deal. It's 70 miles around Mesa, and it was on a Saturday, and it was fun. But some guy was waving, and he wrecked his bike, and he landed bare hands on the pavement. And he was one of the guys we were with. I mean, he just sat in his house and wanted to cry for a week, and his hands were, and that's gum disease. And I'm supposed to ask all my guests. It's the most common question people send me. Howard at dentaltown.com is ask your guests: would you, Tommy, would you take the vaccine today?
Yeah, well, absolutely. And I'm scheduled to take it Friday. And I would have taken it sooner if we had an opportunity here in Nashville to do it. One of the things that I learned, in the salivary diagnostics world, when you move from your dental practice into an actual laboratory and see how laboratories work, the regulations and rules, regardless, if we want to, maybe talk about how quickly this vaccine was developed, they still have to go through the same structure of validation, regardless of how fast they do it. I mean, you cannot come out with a product. We cannot come out with a salivary diagnostic test without going through all kind of CLIA certifications, FDA approval. We had to have the Forsyth Institute in Boston help validate the process. So, for me, I've got a little bit of an insider information on how tests are developed. And as far as vaccines go, I would 100% be on board with it.
It is it was, game theory is so important. And I have two loves. I have dentistry and I have economics, right? I have an MBA from ASU. And it was kind of funny because, when I was little, you got to listen to the critics, because if you live long enough, you find out why they're right. And they were saying, what do you mean markets are efficient? All prices worked in the market. How do you explain the 1929 crash, the 1987 Black Monday, the Y2K crash? If there's perfect information and humans are rational, explain the Y2K crash, explain Lehman's crash, explain the next crash, which has got to be around the corner, because it's been since 2008 since the last one. And read business cycles. It got Schumpeter, my favorite Austrian economist, a Nobel Prize. And the reason there's business cycles is because we're the crazy monkeys making all the decisions, and that's why I'm bullish on artificial intelligence, because I've seen natural intelligence in history for 5,000 years. And we got 5,000 years of evidence that we're basically monkeys who lost their tail. But I noticed that Nobel Prize in economics about 10 years ago was for someone mixing economics with psychology. And I noticed this year's they gave it again to another guy. And what the Nobel Committee is trying to signal you is that markets aren't rational. Information is not perfect. There's a lot of crazy people. There's 8 billion crazy people. I mean, look at the Nashville thing that happened on Christmas morning.
Right.
5 minutes right before we went on, breaking news is our president just was the first U.S. president to get impeached, not once but twice. I mean, they're crazy times. When I was in school and learned about the Spanish influenza epidemic, I wasn't even creative enough to even imagine that could happen to me in my lifetime. I thought I was reading history, and but you always hear history repeat itself. So these are indeed interesting times. But a lot of these things that look like they're brand new, people have been talking about these things for generations. And now with even this vaccine, I knew we wouldn't get a vaccine because I was stuck in the attenuated vaccine where they would go get the polio, try to kill them all, and then put them in you, and then hope none of them lived and gave you polio. I didn't even see the messenger RNA coming, from Moderna. And I mean, it's not even a virus. It's a piece of software code. A virus is a self-replicating mechanism, which was one of the pieces that had to be in our car. I know you're into cars. I love your Mustang right on the right on the wall. But you can't have a car without some basics like wheels, an engine, and you can't have life without a self-replicating mechanism. So viruses came before life because life couldn't self-replicate unless you had that one part. And but now you have game theory. And game theory is that human thing where Moderna didn't even package single dose vaccines because they knew the rollout would be so huge. They packaged them 100 at a time. And now 25 to 40% of the vaccines being wasted because they opened up 100. They only got 60 in line because everybody went to game theory and started saying, well, I'm going to let Tommy try it. And if his hair don't fall out, I'll try it. But if his hair falls out, I'm not trying it. And my mother, she's 82. She's like, well, Howie, I'm gonna wait. I'm gonna see what. Mom, you're 82. You have the least amount of waiting to go. I mean, you need to get down there first in line. And she's in game theory. You can't talk her out of it. But man, these are just such strange times. I mean, I don't know how else to describe it. Has this been the craziest year you've ever seen in your life, or what?
It is, man. And I think scientifically, I always, one of my favorite movies, it was probably Apollo 13, back. Because that was the first like real-time movie, maybe of my generation, where you could actually see in a fairly modern movie, the whole world coming together to figure out how to get those astronauts home. And I've kind of likened this whole process of, man, we really had like the whole world trying to figure this out. And I know there's difference in opinions of different countries and who did what and all that. But at the end of the day, the science community has been trying to figure this out because we've never been able to have a vaccine for a coronavirus of anything, right? I mean, a cold, we've never been able to figure that out for a cold. And so to see them come in and do this and with the help they've gotten from probably countries that we'll never even know about and people that we'll never hear about, and to be able to produce this, I think, and it's going to change vaccines forever, like you were talking about with RNA.
And by the way, the people who are obsessed with where the virus came from, I'd like to remind you that the Spanish influenza, they all agree that it came from a pig to a farmer in Kansas, where I was born and raised. When my mom started saying the China virus, I'm like, Mom, you're from Kansas. And then he got drafted to World War I. And then so he went to Leavenworth, which is the first confirmed breakout. And then when they got rolled into World War I, that was the first European breakout. So basically, the Spanish influenza was just the United States of America. And by the way, the only reason they called it Spanish influenza is because you couldn't talk about your government like that without getting killed in the United States and Russia and China and Germany. And Spain was neutral during World War II. Just everybody always talks about Switzerland was neutral. Spain was neutral. And they didn't get involved in that, and they so they were the ones that had free press, and they were writing about this flu. So everybody said, "Oh, you mean that Spanish influenza?" But I know this is off topic and everything, but I want to ask you. You're all into gums and perio and all that, but you're also into the AACD, and I just want to, when I say this, I really piss off AACD guys, but since you're clear away in Nashville, and I know you can't come over here, and even in that fast car, I know you can't come over here and kick my ass for at least 48 hours. My gosh, you young kids, you see someone and they're pretty and you say, oh, you look even prettier with veneers. And you file all
Yes.
the enamel off their teeth and do veneers. But you know what? She's 25. Do you know what that looks like at 35,
Yeah.
45, 55, 65, 75, 85? What is that going to look like 70 years later? I'm asking you, when someone does upper 10 veneers on a 25-year-old, if she just lives to be 85, so 85 minus 25, let's see, I've had geometry, calculus, trig, what is that? How many years is that? 50 years later, will any of those veneers have to be replaced? Will any of them turn into full crowns? Will any of them die and need endo? What do the gums look around these things? So how do you, and I call it the aesthetic health compromise. I mean, I can't tell you how many beautiful women I've seen, they wanted Invisalign and they're going to pay $6,000, and I'm just sitting there thinking, okay, you go to ASU. There's not one guy at ASU that's even going to notice this and all thing. But they're ready to drop $6,500 to do that. And the same thing with veneers. Same thing. Now I'm so old at 58 that now a lot of my friends are getting Botox and all these surgeries and all this stuff like that. So you got to do what the human wants. But you're a doctor, so you know everything's a trade-off. So how does an AACD accredited mind like yours, what are you thinking when you go to put veneers on teeth? And what would you tell the kids who are just going to put veneers on a 25-year-old and think they'll be beautiful when they're 100?
Yeah, this would be a passionate answer because, I'm of, I don't even know what my generation is called. I think we're called like Generation X or something like that, where we don't even know what to call us. We're not millennials. We're not the greatest generation, and we're just kind of stuck there. So I have come along with the AACD. Well, I'll back up. So my dad, all into perio, all into microbiology, the whole thing. And of course, like any child, I kind of wanted to do my own thing and do something different. And so for a period of time, I really moved into the aesthetic side of dentistry, took all the training, got accredited AACD. And the farther I got from health and tissue, the more I realized how important it was. And so it was definitely a journey for me to realize that everything starts with health. And so it's my hygiene team, when we talk about being therapists, we take the same photos. We get just as excited about periodontal success as we do about, cosmetic cases. But I'm going to jump into what you're talking about now. And I came through accreditation when there was a phrase called responsible aesthetics, because everybody was concerned about exactly what you're saying now. And training, I can't say that enough, because what I'm seeing, and I'm calling it the Instagram world right now, it's like you said, people want to put veneers on anything. If there's an influencer, if there's any way that they can get a picture on Instagram to say that they can do it, I'm seeing it. But I'm also seeing the side effect of that. I've seen 2 cases this year of the mid 20-year-old female, and their teeth are falling out because they didn't know how to bond the veneers on. And so I think in an era of responsibility, we've got to be very selective on what we're actually preparing. With, people said for the longest time, you can't do a prepless veneer with pressed ceramic. You got to prep it for press. And that's not true anymore. With the lithium disilicates, and I've got cases on my Instagram now, complete no prep cases that are some of my favorite cases that I've done. And so to your point about being responsible with this, yeah, you got a lot of clientele right now that are interested in aesthetics. As crazy a year as 2020 was, it was one of the best cosmetic years I've had. It's crazy. I mean, it's unexplainable to me. Kind of like, why is the stock market still growing with as much turmoil as we've had this year? So there's some things I can't explain on it, but I can say that we've got to be very astute to make sure that we're taking care of people for the long term. And so minimal prep, I got no problem with. If you want to be very selective with what you're doing, and be very honest about with the client about where you're going to compromise, it's going to be on, I'm not going to take any more of your tooth away that doesn't need it. And if you need it, really, why? Crowding, that's a different set of circumstances, but move the teeth first, if you've got that option. So I don't mean to sound preachy about it, but being AACD or accredited AACD, I get a lot of the cases that are like you're talking about that are failing. And I'm really seeing more and more and more of that. The more social media is creating a platform for showing cases. That's a long answer. You can get more specific with me if you want to, but
No,
I,
that was an amazing answer, and I love it. So, X-rays is a great example. Money's the answer. What's the question? Röntgen developed the X-ray long before. Thomas Edison had a big part in the X-ray machine. He walked away from it. Röntgen's, the cancer, he walked away from it. But anyway, it was out there for a long time, and the dentists didn't really look at it. And then after World War II, they started dental insurance because they had the wage price freezes, and you weren't allowed to give people more money. So the workers started, the longshoremen said, well, then we pay for our dental. And that was the birth of Delta Dental and for the Longshoremen's Club in Washington, Oregon, California. And they decided they were going to cover cleaning, exam, and x-rays 100%. Oh, my God, as soon as they covered 100%, x-ray machines went across America like a domino machine. And so that's 100% adoption. I mean, practice management software, that's 80, 90% adoption. Digital x-rays is well over 60, 70%. But CAD-CAM, it never got over, I say 15%, but I can't find any numbers over 12%. Salivary Diagnostics didn't take off. I mean, what kind of penetration do you think Salivary Diagnostics got, and why is that? Why, and even our hygienists, like you go to 4 years of college and you're a hygienist, you go to 4 years of college, you're a nurse. The nurse is giving shots, drawing blood in the hospital. She's got blood all over her. And the hygienist, that isn't nearly as aggressive like that. So a lot of it's culture, a lot of it's tribal, but a nurse, if she walked in to a hygiene room and didn't know anything about dentistry or hygiene, licked in the mouth, she'd order blood work.
yes.
I mean, she wouldn't even blink at it. I mean,
No,
she's not going to
that's
try to.
physicians too.
Yeah. So where's the disconnect?
Well, I mean, not to bash on our training at all, but I think our training in our institutions is still going to focus on the things that are going to get us the ability to begin practice. But they don't really give us the much beyond the basics. And I think there's obviously a reason for that. I mean, I got out of Tennessee and I felt like I can extract teeth, I can fill teeth, I can crown teeth. I got a pretty good set of base skills to get started in my profession. But after that, everything I've learned after that has been in continuing education. And the continuing education model is, of course, we all have our different interests. And why I think periodontal therapy has not taken off any more than it has is because there's never been an interest. I mean, it's like you're talking about CAD-CAM. I think one of the barriers to that is just cost. That's been one of the things that's been a barrier to entry there. Aesthetic dentistry, very low barrier to entry except for education. So you can kind of go through that process. But when you start talking about periodontal therapy, most of us as dentists were taught that was a hygienist thing, that we weren't even going to really be involved in that. They were going to do that. And they were going to scale 1 quadrant per hour with local anesthetic. And we were going to focus on calculus and tartar buildup, and we really weren't taught any different. And I think medicine would look at the exact same infection completely different. And what I've learned from Dr. Brad Bale that you mentioned earlier, the Bale-Donine method is one of the most enlightening things I've ever done, which is look at periodontal disease from the mind of a physician and take a course with physicians so that we can actually talk about how the body responds to disease process. And I tell my patients now, we're not treating periodontal disease for your teeth. To me, it's not a teeth problem. It's a body problem. It's an inflammation problem. And if you've got chronic inflammation, that's what we know is the link to heart disease, to heart attack, to diabetes control and sugar control. And all those things are now totally related to chronic inflammation.
And you got a dental school in your backyard. You're in Tennessee, so you got a dental school in Memphis, and
Yes.
you got a dental school right there in Nashville, Meharry Medical College.
Right.
What is the dean there? Sheree Farmer Dixon. Are they teaching that there? Is it Is it a big thing there, or what would you say?
No, I think what most people are learning now, what I've got some students that'll shadow me on occasion from Harry. And, of course, I haven't done a lot of CE at University of Tennessee as a student, but I think most of what we're learning now is that there are more correlative evidence that periodontal disease may be related to heart disease. It might be related to Alzheimer's control, but I think it stops there. Then you stop realizing that there's literature and studies in medical literature as opposed to dental literature. There's more information about periodontal disease and the specifics of it in medical literature than there is in dental literature. And so when you start talking about the Journal of Neuroinflammation, talking about their study with 50,000 patients, and how these microbes have the ability to get into carotid artery spaces, to get in the endothelial linings of just your artery system in general, and what that actually means. I think in dentistry, we never really even learned what chronic inflammation was outside of the mouth. But we consider chronic inflammation gingivitis or something that we can see. We don't realize that chronic inflammation is internal as well as external. And when they say, what causes plaque accumulation in your artery, we used to equate it to cholesterol, and now we would equate it to inflammation. And so I think dentists as a whole need to learn a lot more about their body health in terms of just equating everything to the mouth. And I think that's what the Bale Duneen helped me with a lot.
Yeah, and his heart disease, that's it's amazing when he starts talking about that heart disease. He knows some of these people are just walking time bombs. So what are you most passionate about now? I mean, we had the pandemic. We had, 2020 was just a write-off. It was what an insane year. Now it's 2021. I got my first dose on the 5th. I'm getting the second one on the 26th. You're getting your first vaccine. It's January 13th. How close to normalization do you think we are, and what are you most excited and passionate about when getting back up on your feet this year?
Well, man, I can probably echo a lot of people in that, at least in Tennessee, we were closed for 2 months. We were considered non-essential, and we had companies here, garage door opening companies that were considered essential, nurseries where you could go buy plants and trees, they were considered essential. And for them to tell me that I was not essential and I was going to be closed as a healthcare provider for 2 months, that did not feel good. And it definitely motivated me to never let anyone in the healthcare profession feel like dentistry was not necessary. And so coming back, trying to come back from that, trying to get your team to come back from that, trying to get everybody to realize that our infection control procedures in dentistry have been outstanding long before the COVID outbreak. And, I came along, with HIV coming a lot more mainstream, and we had to prepare for that. And so I've been very impressed by what dentistry's been able to do in spite of COVID-19 in our practices and the way we've been able to come back to work. And what am I most passionate about right now is I am ready for dentistry to be back in the forefront of not just dentistry, but we know how to treat people with infections and diseases. And we do it every day in an aerosol environment. And we've been, in my opinion, a super solid healthcare industry in spite of COVID-19. And I know that sounds like a pep talk, but, I'm excited about getting my practice back and all my patients back and getting normal and not having to wear a mask every second of the day. Yeah, I'm excited about that, and traveling and fun. And, I feel like one of the things we took away with COVID was fun, period. And so, getting out again, I'm probably the most passionate about getting my life back like I want it, like everybody else does. But I really am excited about where dentistry is. I've never been more excited about how much information we've got now about testing and how important testing is and how important microbiology is as a whole, because the whole world has been trying to figure out this one thing. And believe me, there's a lot of other things out there from a bacteria and virus standpoint that we don't want either. And so to have the spotlight on dentistry, on microbiology, I think we just have a huge opportunity in dentistry to take it to a level of importance that it's never been before. That's my pep talk. I feel like I ought to do a little cheer or something.
Well, again, I'm so impressed with so many of your faculty, and one of them is Steve Anderson. I mean, Steve
Mhm.
Anderson's been known as a mover and shaker in all things practice management. He thinks outside the box. He's crown counsel. What's he think of all this, and talk about his involvement with this?
Well, when we sold Oral DNA to Quest, that was basically it for me. I was not a part of the company anymore, and what I had learned in that was so much about the microbiology. And I'm very blessed with hygienists that I feel like are a lot more like a nurse practitioner. I give them a lot more responsibility. Our perio numbers in my practice are going to run about 50% of our coding, and so their numbers are amazing. And I feel like, talking about your economic background, dentistry has a huge opportunity to be more diversified in practice, in their own businesses. Because if we can get our hygiene numbers up and we can start treating disease, then we're going to have a better number at the end of the month. And so when I showed my numbers to Steve, because Steve and I were friends before No More Hygiene, and I was a member of the Crown Council and big believer in coaching and all those kind of things. And when I showed him what we were doing and how we were talking about it, that's how No More Hygiene came to be, is that we really believe that looking at the disease differently, talking about it differently like your physician would talk about it, equating it to testing like your patients are very familiar with, using analogies like fingernails and hair and all of the other body parts that patients are very familiar with, to talk to them about a disease process that we always equated to a physical sign or symptom. Steve has just been a master at putting that together for chairside delivery. So many people outside of dentistry don't know how long it takes to implement something. And so implementation of anything new without a plan and a strategy sometimes never happens. And so Steve, I call him the great implementer, because he's really taken a lot of information for us and boiled it down into common sense conversation. I call him the Andy Griffith of dentistry. So we can have these conversations in a short period of time and convert to therapy. And you're just talking about it in a way that is more medical. And I find it so much easier. I really do.
A lot of practice management consultants will come in there and say, I mean, come on, there's a thread on hygiene on Dental Town Day where my hygienist wants to raise to $55 an hour. And you're like,
Yeah.
okay, Delta's doesn't even give
Right.
you $55 for the cleaning. And, and then you say, okay, well, if this is going to work, we're going to sell the fluoride. It's $15, and of course any rejection at all, and they just go crazy. Salivary Diagnostics, same thing. You say, well, this will check to see if you have cancer growing in 5 different places, but you'll have to pay for this yourself. No way, no way. If the insurance doesn't pay for it, and you're sitting there. I love that you're sitting there in front of a car, because it's so perfect for dentistry, because dentists they always tell me that there's no money in their town. The last time I heard this, I was in a small town in Kansas, and we were eating at a restaurant, and I said, well, okay, look at the window. There's a Quick Trip across the street. I said, how many vehicles, cars, trucks are at Circle K right now? And he goes, 7. I go, okay, and what are they all? And it was 5 F-150s, a 250, and a 350. So
Right.
you're looking at 5 that cost, 90. The 250 is, the 350 is, big money. Then I tell these people that on cars, this is my favorite stat, that the average new car price in America is $33,560. Source Kelly Blue Book and USA Today. On average, we'll buy 13 new cars before we're 76 years old. So these Americans will buy 13 cars at $33,560 a piece, and it's only the dentists who believe that if the insurance doesn't pay, and they'll say, oh, well, we said it though, and she got mad. Well, welcome to sales. Welcome to sales. When you sell someone a new car, usually if you're selling cars on a car lot, you're going to have 25 people walk on that parking lot and walk around that car before one drives off on it. but they still get everyone 13 times before they're 76 years old. And you go into a building, any medical dental building with eight dentists in there, 6 of them, 7 of them out of 8 has never sold one treatment plan ever for the price of that new car. I mean, look at Clear Choice.
Yes.
I mean, they're publicly traded. They're all, not publicly traded. They've been bought and sold by private equity 5 times. They got a dozen locations. I think they do about 18,000 arches a year for 25,000 an arch. Most of their arches are full mouth, so it's 50 grand.
Yeah.
And the people who pay 50 grand to go from a dental cripple to that in one day have the same feeling as you had when you bought that little Mustang and drove off and you just loved life. And my homies won't even offer that new car. They just sit there and say, well, you have, it looks like a bomb went off in your mouth, but the worst tooth in your whole body is right there, and the insurance will only pay for just one per year, so let's just be a one-tooth dentist. And then the guy's like, okay, that sounds great. And then when he's done, he drives off in an F-150 and goes buys a new 12 gauge. So how do you get dentists to have the same enthusiasm about teeth as dentists do about their own damn car?
Man, you and I could have a conversation way beyond what we're talking about now. But I'll tell you, man, I've done this. I've done the research on what you're talking about, and and talk about the F-150. I'm a Ford family. My grandfather was a Ford dealer, and the F-150 has been the #1 selling car in our country for 40 years in a row. The F-150.
Well, yeah, if you call a truck a car, you can say that.
Yeah, it's been the #1 selling vehicle, right? Well, the average price of a new F-150 is 42 grand. So you're talking about people that are the #1 vehicle are willing to spend $42,000. And yet we're afraid to talk to them about periodontal disease or a crown or quadrant dentistry. And you're so right. I think, how do I get people to talk? Because I'm excited about it. I mean, you can't go into any, well, I don't want to call it sales, but in any opportunity to help someone get treatment and be in a hurry and don't have any time and kind of give them the quick rundown and show them a picture. I think, one of the things that we use for our periodontal patients is our health history. And so if our patients have had heart disease, diabetes, cancer, anything that is a cofactor where periodontal disease could be an accessory or an inflammatory part of that, then we'll talk to them about that. But how do you get people to pay for anything? Is you put it in a way to make them want it, because they don't want anything that we have. They don't want veneers. They don't want whitening. They don't want anything. They want what it's going to do for them, right? They want what white teeth are going to do for them. They want what a healthy mouth is going to do for them. And so until we start talking in a psychology in ways that make them want the stuff that we have, they're not going to want it. If you keep saying scaling and root planing and probe charts and bleeding on probing and it doesn't hurt, and you try to explain why it doesn't hurt, all they want to know is, why should they do this and why should they want it? That's me being a pep talker again. So if my homies go to nomorehygiene.com, what are they going to find? At nomorehygiene.com, you're going to basically get an overview of our course model. Right now, it's virtual, as everybody has moved to that platform. So our course is about an 8:30 to 3:30 model right now, 1-day course. When we go back in person, it's a 2-day course, Fridays and Saturdays. So you'll see the schedule, you'll see how to sign up, and then basically just an overview of what we offer from an education standpoint.
And tell us about the course. You have an all-day lecture, and how much money is that and all that stuff?
Well, the virtual course right now, I believe it's $275, and it is a full day of lecture. Of course, it's Zoom like this. And what I'll do in the morning is talk about the science and inflammation and why you should believe all of this. And I'll explain to you from medical terms why this is a different animal than we used to think that it was, and why you should be concerned about it, and give you some analogies and ways to talk about this differently. Then in the afternoon, one of my hygienists, Andrea, who's been with me 12 years and been in the whole evolution of no more hygiene, will talk to the hygienist about how to do it, because the therapy model is different. It's easier, it's faster, just like everything else in dentistry. And she'll talk to hygienists about how to execute that. Then Steve Anderson will be talking about buying trends, just what we were talking about now, on how to get your patients engaged in what you have to offer. Because I can tell you, man, one of my weirdest stories is that I had an emergency patient come in last year, tooth number 19, abscess tooth, either needed to extract it or do a root canal and save it. And she wanted to extract it because she didn't have the money. On the way out, she saw a Botox sign that I had in my hallway. On the way out the door, stopped and said, do you guys offer Botox? And we were like, yeah. And she said, well, can I do that today? So it taught me that if people want it, money is not the problem. And getting people to understand it and value what you have to offer is the key. And that's where I feel like Steve really changed the game, in terms of having these types of conversations.
He did. He really did. He's done a lot of very amazing things in dentistry. So your young kids, 6,500 of them, they came out during a pandemic. Their clinicals were a disaster. A lot of them only were able to do endo on extracted teeth. I mean, it just crazy times. And my gosh, what advice would you give them? I mean, they've got to be looking at Tommy and his dad Tom and Howie back in '87. That, oh my God, it was so much easier back then. And I'm going to pull out my violin and I'm going to start playing the song with the world's smallest violin. I'd still rather be a doctor of dental surgery in the United States of America in 2021 than almost half the countries that I've lectured in. I mean, my gosh. And it's so amazing. It lifts my human spirits when you go to cities like Kathmandu, we were in Cambodia. Yeah. And Cambodia was a really amazing experience for me because I didn't get Cambodia the first time I went there. And I saw two Cambodias. So when I was talking to all the dentists who were 35 and under, they're bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. But all the dentists that were my age, is like they didn't want to meet me. They didn't want to talk to me. And they kind of had a dead look. And then they took me to the Khmer Rouge Museum. And so, we were sitting here talking about how these are such politically troubling times. No, how would you like to have a country of like 12 million people and then there's a new government comes in town, kills 3 of the 12 million. Yeah. Every dentist my age witnessed the killing of his wife or mother or kid or neighbor or whatever, and they were just dead. They were walking dead. So if this is traumatic for you, because you're living at a time when the U.S. president was impeached, right? If this is traumatic, dude, what would you have done if you'd have been on the receiving side of the 10-year Vietnam War or the 10-year Afghanistan War or the 19-year Afghanistan War? I mean, so yeah, they're bad, but I've seen a hell of a lot worse in my lifetime. So what advice would you give them to, what pep talk would you give them to get back on their feet? Besides the obvious, work hard and hustle and treat everybody like you want to be treated. That's rule number 1. Yeah. And if you're sitting at a DSO and a gosh darn office manager who's not a dentist is telling you to put a perio chip in everyone because the insurance pays for it, go tell her to go to hell and quit. Because I'll tell you one thing I've learned at 58, people who spend their whole life doing things they hate for money always end up on heroin and drugs. I read an article, 95% of prostitutes are heroin addicts, and they think it might have something to do with they really hate their job. Don't do things you hate for money, and you certainly don't have to if you live below your means. I mean, go move back in with your mom and dad, and if you can only find one job 3 days a week, then find another job the other 3 days a week. I mean, you don't need more than 1 day off a week the first 10 years. And if you're really bored, well, my God, start a family. I had 4 boys in 60 months. I graduated May 11, I had my office open September 87, and made 4 babies in 60 months. And what do they? And what's their response? Well, I've been dating Charlie for 10 years, and I have a different DSO job every year for 5 because I can't decide if I want to start my own practice and marry Charlie and make a baby. Dude, I could have figured that out on the first date.
Yeah. Well, I mean, telling you, man, I think if I were, I'm kind of a good pep talker because I'm just excited about our profession in general. I'm excited to talk to my patients about what we have to offer in dentistry now. And, I think our technology and gosh, man, where 3D dentistry is going and computers and, implants. I mean, all my young dentists that we kind of mentor together in our area, it's the best time. I just think it's to get into dentistry right now. I couldn't be more excited for the younger generation. To your point, and I would tell this to young hygienists too. If you think cleaning teeth all day for the rest of your life is going to be fulfilling, or you're already burned out at it 2 years, find another job. Start finding people that want to make people better, that want to heal a disease process. And if you think your hygienist isn't going to want more work to treat periodontal disease, you're wrong, because they do actually want to make people better. For the young dentists out there, like you said, spend some time in CE if you got time, because there's so much stuff that's available to train you right now. And I think that if when we can go back to traveling again, one of the best things that I've done, it sounds like you have done too, is visit another country as a dentist and do some type of medical mission work. Because I think that'll change your perspective forever, and you'll come back more motivated than ever, because we only see what's around us right now. And I'm telling you, man, like you said, in the world, I go every year. I didn't go this year, but I go every year to Honduras, and it's one of the best things that I ever do. I mean, so I think my final maybe thought on this is, being a young dentist right now would stink because of COVID and getting out of school and those kind of things. But you're entering a profession that it is moving at a rate that I've never seen it before. And I couldn't be more happy and proud to be a part of it. And hopefully it'll open up here a little bit more, and these young dentists will have more opportunities sooner rather than later.
And last question, I can't believe we've gone over an hour, and I'm just, but another guy that's been on this show, Steve Anderson has, but, and the Bale Dolene and all those, but Guy Yatros, he's on your faculty, and I think of him as a sleep guy. So what's a sleep guy? I mean, you got heart guys on your team, you got all different guys, but why is my buddy Guy on your team?
Well, think about where sleep apnea was 10 years ago, right? I mean, I remember when sleep apnea came on and we were using an appliance, way back when. I want to say the first sleep apnea appliance I used was just by Glidewell. And I didn't even know exactly what it was or how I was supposed to do it. And medicine looked at dentists treating sleep apnea as fringe, like that was a fringe thing. We didn't do sleep studies. We didn't understand that. And where is it now? I mean, I've got friends that specialize in sleep dentistry. That's all they do. They have sleep clinics in their practices. And now it's mainstream that if you can't tolerate a CPAP or don't want to, then you're going to see a dentist that specializes in that. And why? I mean, why do we treat sleep apnea? So we don't die from it. And that's to the medical component of what we're talking about. The dentistry is as close to our medical colleagues as it's ever been. And we don't want to die from sleep apnea, so we're going to see a dentist. We don't want the correlation between periodontal disease and heart disease. So who are we going to see? A dentist. And we have to understand how these body parts and these body mechanisms and these body processes interrelate, so that we can help our patients live happier and healthier than they ever have. And that sounded like a tagline. I should write that down. But that's why. I mean, because sleep apnea is a serious health condition, and it's being able to be treated by dentists.
You mentioned the Glidewell, and I just want to plug his book, Constant Change: Adventures in Business Life. My Journey from Startup to 5,000 Employees by James Glidewell, who just beat COVID. I mean, and a lot of people don't know his story, but you know, you served in the Navy. He went to Vietnam. He went to Vietnam, you know, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, being a patriot, and came back completely disillusioned, but focused and worked hard, and you know, what a legend. But what did the Navy do to you? What did the Navy mean to you? Do you think that how did it affect your journey?
Well, it's going to be affected in a little bit way than that. It's because my dad was in the Navy. So my father was in the Navy. I was not in the Navy. That was just my
your
dad.
dad.
Yeah. Did it affect me? Absolutely. Because I was born in Millington Naval Base, and so grew up, you know, in the Navy as a Navy family. And you know, the pride that I have for the Navy is significant. And for, of course, you know, being proud of my dad and all those kind of things. So, you know, I say, you know, while I didn't serve in the Navy, I was part of either going in the Navy or going into practice with my dad right out of school. And that was a decision that I had to make. If I hadn't had a father as a dentist, I would have gone into the Navy right out of dental school. But, you know, for me, I was fortunate, had a dad that wanted me to come to practice and that I could lean on early in my career. But I would definitely recommend it now.
And that's why you don't name your kid after you. I mean, even I, the second, podcasting, Tommy the third,
hey man,
confused
I
his
would
own
like
bio.
to take credit for that, but I will say my son, I've got a son, and he's the fourth. So just wait. I mean, that's going to be.
Is he the fourth?
Yeah, he's a four.
But the record is my buddy George Foreman, who had 8 kids. And
that's
he
right.
named all 8 of them George.
He made it simple too, right?
But you know what? The phrase I loved the most today was, you know, I always call it the aesthetic health compromise. I mean, you know, no woman needs Botox, a tummy tuck, and a boob job, but if that's what she wants to have, that, you know, she's the customer. And I called it the aesthetic health compromise. I really like your responsible aesthetics.
Yes.
You know, and my last parting shot on these young kids is, you know, when you see older dentists stick their tongue in a light socket and knocks them clear across the room, you're supposed to learn from that. You're not supposed to say, well, let me see if it does that to me. And I'll tell you what every kid does the first 5 years out of school. You know, the way the human mind works is, you know, you're walking through the jungle and a carnivore jumps out, and you don't have time to sit there and say, is that a carnivore or an omnivore? I wonder if his canines are pointed or flat.
Right.
You know, your brain is designed to process every single thing it could possibly know instantly, and that's your intuition. And I have just gone my entire life watching people, they're just third eye blind. I mean, they just will not listen to their own brain. And then if they hear their brain say something, they start arguing with it. And every time a young kid gets in trouble is because the patient says, well, how about you just do this and that and just hook these two together and put a tooth behind it, and it's got perio, and you're like, and your gut says, oh, hell no. But you're 25, he's 75, he's more aggressive, and the next thing you know, the tail is wagging the dog, and then you're in front of the state board or a lawyer or whatever, and you just settle because you didn't even want to do it in the first place. Well, old dogs, you know, you learn some taglines, and one of my best taglines is I just laugh and go, okay, I'm not even going to respond to that because you didn't have to respond. I'm not going to roll in the mud and argue. I mean, I'm not going to. And then when they ask you to do something illegal, and you just say thing, you just laugh and say, well, you obviously don't want me to risk my 8-year doctor license for your crazy charade with whatever the hell you want me to do with your insurance or whatever the hell.
Right.
But just laugh because it's kind of like, because I see it in texting. I could send you a text that says, Tommy, the Titans are the worst NFL team that ever lived. But if I follow it with LOL or a happy face or a guy laughing so hard he's crying, you just sit there and you don't. But if I didn't put any emoji, you might think, well, look at the Arizona Cardinals, or you know they didn't do too good. So you can say anything with an LOL. So just so when your gut's about to puke, just laugh and you don't have to answer everything. You don't have to engage a fight. You don't have to engage in deal, but don't let the patients talk you into doing stuff that's not right. And then the flip side of that is you don't like to sell dentistry. Well, then if you don't like to sell dentistry and you're a dentist, that means we might as well just get rid of dentistry. We might as well just throw it away because the dentists want you to buy Ford Mustangs and F-150s and fancy vacations while you're a dentulous. So the way you get over sales is just treat other people like you want to be treated and say, well, Tommy, obviously you're not going to drive that car with that mouth. I mean, one of these things don't look like the other on Sesame Street. And I'll tell you what, and don't nickel and dime and figure it out on a whole part. Say, Tommy, look, we can always do nothing. It's the lowest cost, cheap, leave right now. We can always just do the basics. That one hurts, this, that. We can pull that too, do these three things, and help probably your insurance pay for that because they don't pay for anything, and that's probably about not even doing anything. But if you wanted to do this, like that car that you drove in on, dude, this is going to cost you 15 grand. So it's not a question of whether you have 15 grand because I see your card. The question is when is that something you want to do? I mean, is this a good time? Or are you waiting to pay off that car? You got a kid in school. It's not a matter if, it's just a matter of when. When do you think you would want to do a comprehensive approach to your mouth so that you can drive a car inside your mouth that's a brand new car? And where you go wrong is writing up a treatment plan. Well, number 2 needs a build-up and a PFM. Number 3 needs an MOD. Number 4 needs an RCT. Is it 1 canal or 2? I don't know. We're going to bill you for 1 canal, but when we get in there, we might have to raise the price because there's another one. And we want to put an implant here, but I can't tell you the price because it might need a bone graft. You know, you just quit selling. You're killing yourself, okay? Just look in the mouth. And what kind of car do you see? Do you think, insurance will buy you a used car? There's nothing wrong with a used car. 70% of all cars sold in the United States are used. 70% of all houses sold in the United States are used. Every time one person buys a brand new house, 2 buy a used house. So there's nothing wrong with used car, used dentistry, used houses. But just get to that point with the patient in 4 seconds while you're looking at him in the eye. And don't let them talk you into something different. And if they say, how come the insurance doesn't pay for the fluoride? And I say, dude, the insurance doesn't even pay for me to clean your teeth. I mean, they're paying me less for the cleaning than I make an hour. That the insurance is something that your employer buys to keep you at your job. It has nothing to do with my dental office, but we know that it's important to everyone to have subsidies or something free or whatever. So we work with you on your insurance. But you know what you really need? You need a new car. And then every dental office in every county I've been in that has got 8. There's that one guy every Friday. He works Monday through Thursday on his sign. But every Friday he goes in and usually has like an anesthesiologist meet him there, put someone to sleep. A lot of like I'm lazy to where I can't do 4 molar root canals in a row. I'll bring an endodontist in for that. Don't learn anesthesiology because you're not an anesthesiologist. And they'll do a $25,000 case every Friday, their whole damn career. And then the other 7 dentists have never done it once. So it's all, dude, the only cavity you've got is between your ears, and treat that one and your patient will be better served. Tommy, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was a complete honor to podcast you.
Well, it was an honor for me to be here, man. I appreciate you and what you've done, and I couldn't be more humbled to have been asked to be on here. So I really appreciate it.
All right, buddy. Well, have a good day and tell your dad I said hi.
I will. Appreciate it.
Buddy. Bye-bye.
Thank you. All right. Bye-bye.